Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojó ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
Hello and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are y'all doing?
Great.
Hammer time.
Oh, hammer time. That was unplanned. All right, cool. So we got actually a lot. We didn't get to go last week. So we've had a developer live stream, showed off some combat. So obviously I think that's going to be some discussion tonight. But there was something else I think y'all wanted to start with because there was quite a bit that came out of that live stream.
Yeah, so I started kind of thinking about some stuff from the live stream, and I came to a bit of a realization with the seasons and racial influence and biomes, the idea of how much variation there's going to be on buildings and freeholds if the ones that we buy are the versions we're going to see with zero variance, or if we're going to see ones that try to blend in. And so with that, I'm thinking about things on levels of different sort of sliders and blends that they'd be doing, where one slider would be the linear one for weather as it goes through the different seasons. The weather effects change its properties respectively. One would be the biome that it's in. I don't think anything's supposed to be like a transitory biome where it's got like part of one and part of another sort of thing. So it would most likely just be one of the 18 biomes, just a static tick of, which one it's going to be. And that could just be represented as like how it comes up from the ground. If it's like, I think of the Eye of Sauron pyramid thing, for example. It could have like maybe rocks that it's kind of coming out of and be a little bit more rocky in a mountainous place. Could be in a naturey sort of place. It's kind of coming up from roots, and there's some like vines kind of going up and through it. Maybe the sludge coming through is green instead of orange red in a more naturey sort of place. Or that could be an influence of the racial characteristics. Whoever put whatever amount of influence in the progression of the node will influence how it looks as it progresses. So if that's the case, that could be something where it's a few different influences that get blended in different ways. Maybe there's 10 different details, and depending on the weight of how much each of the different races put in, they'll have more of those sets of details attributed to their racial version versus the other racial versions that are distributed based on who's there. So that was the first thing I was kind of thinking of right before we got the show started here. Diggs, you wanted to say something about that, I believe.
Yeah, because I had not thought about that before, and I'm thinking I don't even know if it needs to be automatic, especially on the racial stuff necessarily. Maybe you want it to match your own race instead of, or a race or culture that you prefer, rather than it being automatic to the node. Although I guess now that I think about that, that runs into the siege, right? Maybe you want a siege so that you can make your freehold match the dominant race. But yeah, I was thinking even if it's just skins that I can purchase, I would be, because you mentioned seasonal. So if I could get seasonal versions of a skin that I've already purchased, I guess that's kind of what I'm saying for the skins that we do purchase, because whatever happens to the freehold on its own, we can put whatever skins we want on top of that. And I know Phantom has a little bit of a concern about, do we want a lava themed freehold skin in a winter biome or during winter. How's that going to be? But um, I'm just throwing it out there that I wouldn't mind buying uh, uh, skins that reflect the biomes or the seasons, skins, variations of the skins we've already purchased. Um, or maybe they become available in the game. Maybe you have to do stuff in the game, go on certain quests to get that. But um, yeah, they should be doing something for us so that we can get skins or something that will match the biomes, match the seasons, match the races for our freeholds.
I don't think they'll do that.
Why not?
I feel like that would break terms with what they've sold, unless it was
Oh, it's
optional.
not exactly.
Unless it
It's
was,
not
I mean,
exactly what they sold.
I mean, sure, if they give free skins that are different seasonal variations to what you have, then sure. But then to make you use one, I think there's no way they would
can't
do
make.
that.
Yeah, I don't think they can make us
Well,
use
just
one. I'm
like I
just
don't
saying.
think they would forcibly change what you purchased. I mean, they could. I just think I could personally care less, because I would prefer that. Like you guys know, like it's going to look super weird with all this stuff everywhere. But
But that's why I'm saying I think so. I think Neuro was saying automatically happen, but I'm saying I would be willing to purchase
well, and I
the
would too.
variation.
Here's kind of go ahead.
I just
Go,
say I
go,
just
sorry.
I don't see how when you have people that have purchased something, you can't let them use it like you promised, basically.
The theme that kind of got me on that track was listening to the part about um, how the color system was originally kind of thought to work, that you would assign the colors to your paper doll, and that's the dyes that would be used across your equipment. And so from that, I got sort of an idea that there is some level of in-world consistency that they kind of want to enforce with things. And so if that's the case, I'm kind of thinking about it along the lines of, what sort of things people would be able to do to either, if there's like a way, for example, to keep it the way it originally came when you purchased it, and it's going to look like that, and it might be an eyesore, or that you alternatively use the adaptive version that changes with the environment and the influences.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would probably be a good middle ground for something like that. But that's kind of what got me on the idea that there could be different sliders of different sort of influences that
Mm-hmm.
determine what effects there are on the building to make it look more like it belongs in that environment.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking along those lines too. Different channels, right? That you can then basically dye. So yeah, even if we're able to dye our skins of our freeholds, and they could come up with seasonal dyes or racial dyes, or um, maybe, especially, I hadn't even thought about that before. Even could you put your guild colors on your tavern if you wanted to? I don't
That'd
know
be
how many
nice.
people will want to do that, but yeah, so making stuff like that available for our freeholds, dyeing or reskins or all that stuff. Um, that would be awesome. Give us more options. Well, of course, nobody plays these games for that anyway. It's all about the combat.
Well, the other thing is how much they want to invest in all of that stuff compared to how many freeholds there's actually going to be and how many players are going to invest in having a freehold. It's not something that you just do all willy-nilly, and then there's always that looming risk that your node gets knocked over, and then your freehold basically becomes a pile of bricks and wood that the winning raiders can then pick up afterward. So that's the part where it's, there's the risk reward of it. And I think that might be something that will limit people's temptation to really go deep in with the freehold, unless they know that there's been some server-wide alliance or something that this one specific city nobody touches, everybody protects it, because that's one of the two like science node metropolis is that what the server's going to have or something. then, if you're that well locked in and protected, that's sweet. But I would imagine they would tax the hell out of you at that point. I would.
But we get blueprints and stuff like that, so I think our freeholds being knocked over isn't too bad.
Yeah,
Regardless.
you get your blueprints back. I don't see anything about getting your complete items back, but I think it's going to be same rules as like dying in normal combat with items that you're carrying and equipped with. That whole completed items won't be lost. So I would imagine what happens is and they've talked about this, the pre-war expectation before a big battle is going to happen in a node is that you drain the coffers of all of the resources, building up all of your weapons and defenses and everything to try to ensure success. So even if your stuff does get knocked over, you've converted as much of the raw stuff into completed stuff as possible. And so the amount of total loss is going to be reduced as you get to recollect whatever doesn't actually leave your inventories permanently. Materials, the raw stuff, the somewhat processed stuff, that's going to go away, and I'm sure a lot of the construction resources. But from the sound of it, you're going to keep like weapons and armor you had stashed. If that's going to change, that's going to probably piss a lot of people off. But I guess that might be the question I need to ask for this month's Q&A.
So the big question I had, well, it wasn't my question, it came up in the forums, was about mounts at freeholds. And someone was thinking that raiders would be able to steal your mounts.
Yes, that's correct.
Freeholds. But I don't think it's going to be, I don't know if
They
mounts
don't.
are freeholds. I mean, I don't know if mounts are resources or not.
It's a certificate, is a mount certificate or a caravan certificate.
But that's from stables. But I don't know if that means that, I don't know what that means in terms of you keeping the mount. So they get a mount certificate, but I don't know what that means in terms of.
I
The
highly,
mount certificate's the thing that you would use to summon the mount, or
I highly doubt that you lose your mount, because that's similar
That's what I was
to
thinking.
that's similar to naval, right? Because he mentioned that in their, I don't think it was this last. I was think there was the one before. There was the question about naval combat and taking
right,
ships,
right.
and he said, "Oh no, you won't lose your. Nobody can steal your ship." So I would assume mounts are the same.
Yeah,
They
I
can
have a
take your
feeling.
ship, but they can't steal your ship, is what it sounded like. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm thinking the same thing for mounts. Now, I was kind of thinking, my question about that is because do the mounts and pets that you use for animal husbandry, do those count as materials and resources?
I think so.
But I don't know. Or are they your personal mount? That's what I'm curious about. So that's the question I have, is where do those fall in? Is it a mount that you own, or is it a resource? I'm curious about that.
Oh yeah, Joe the horse there is my personal stud. You don't get to have him after this raid. Sorry. He makes the best ones.
He's the best.
No, I don't know about that one. Well, this is also sort of the sort of things that, for all we know, they don't actually have a concrete answer on, and is the sort of thing that we're going to see some sort of systems in A2, and then they'll get our feedback on that and iterate on that towards A3, and so on and so forth as they go through the different iterations. So it might not be something they need to know the answer to right now.
Right, because at some point they're also a finished product, right?
Yeah.
So it's curious to see how that's going to work out. So
are you sure they're not going to do like a zoomed out perspective, like Kingdom Simulator sort of game building up? No, wait, no, that was that other game.
Yeah, so maybe your tamed animals are resources, and then maybe you get to a point once you've bred them or once you have a finished product, then those ones aren't resources. I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see, but that's my question that I would want an answer to.
I feel like once knowing now how hard it will be to get freeholds, that your loss of a freehold, your biggest loss is going to be the freehold, not necessarily what's on it, right? So I would hope as you level your animal husbandry skill, yeah, maybe you have just an awesome mare that you like, you like to breed, but hopefully it wouldn't be too challenging as long as you've leveled your skill up to
Mm,
breed, especially with how fast seasons will go over the
mm,
course of a couple weeks. Um, Obviously, they're going to have to breed. Breeding will have to be somehow in frame with the timeline. So my thought is I'm not worried so much about even crops and things as a farm person, more so because I just assume my skills will let me bring that back up. It's more so the time lost and the time that you'll have to put back in to getting freeholds. I have super mixed feelings. Like that's all I want to do out of this game. So extra challenge is not something I'm looking forward to. But at the same time, we've certainly seen games where anyone could just go claim land and how terribly horrible that ends up. Um, so I get it, but yeah, I feel like that's going to be the biggest loss is just the freehold itself.
yeah, and I wonder. I mean, I think you can't do Valheim crafting, but I love the Valheim crafting in that it all was sensible. It wasn't really mini game so much as just you go through the normal stuff you would expect to um, you know put copper in the smelter and smelt it and get your bars, and then uh, you know bring that to your forge and do stuff at the forge. Um, but in terms of animal husbandry, that has me thinking as we're mastering our skills and we want to breed certain types of but because I guess that's not really genetics, right? What we feed them wouldn't necessarily affect their genetics, but maybe it would. I'm just wondering how we
Well,
would go through to
that's a deeper discussion that I can
Mhm.
have with Dr. Bucky, but
Mhm.
I don't. There are definitely things like, not having like 3 generations of nutrient deficiency, for example. That starts
Mhm.
to mess your stuff up in any
Yeah,
creature.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Healthier ones are probably going to breed healthier offspring. So, yep.
We can move, I guess, on to combat. That
Combat.
I have not much to say. I'm not a combatant, so I just put in chat how nice it was today. I was in Final Fantasy 14, tons of hours in crafting, never once had to go to combat. Perfect, absolutely perfect. But the other part to that too is how much can you really assess combat from watching someone else in God mode, right, without actually feeling it yourself. So that's where I'll
God
stop.
mode should never
Yeah.
do these. Should never
Oh,
ever do these in God
uh,
mode. I
yeah.
have a question
No.
though. Wait, I have a
Go ahead.
question
All
though
right.
for Phantom about the crafting in Final Fantasy 14, because at first you were saying that you did have to do some combat in order to craft. So what ended up changing there? I
Well,
haven't played, so I
no,
don't
the
know.
the beginning. So to get to, you don't have to, but in order to sell things, for example, you need a retainer. To get to a retainer, you have to progress through the main storyline to a certain point.
Hmm.
Same for mount speeds. There's just a lot of desynthesizing materia. There's a lot of different things that you'll need as a crafter that you
Hmm.
do have to go through the story quest to some degree.
Hmm.
I've pushed it to a point and I've not gone any further. I haven't had a need to. So that would be the one downside is to get started. You definitely have to pick a combat class and go with it. But
Hmm.
it's not too challenging.
Great. Okay. So Nero, why don't you start us off on combat?
All right.
Combat the basic weapon attack demo.
So there's a few things in particular that were fairly notable about it. I I like what they were doing, showing off. Trying to get to my notes here. Um, Showing kind of the different play styles that are possible depending on the sort of weapons that you're using. That the great sword is pretty good on range and coverage, and I would imagine it's going to hit pretty hard. And maybe it's got some properties to help let you follow through with your swings rather than being interrupted when you get whacked with something mid-swing. The downside that it provides, though, is that it ramps your speed all the way down to 0 during parts of the attacks. So instead of having full movement like you did with the double daggers, the greatsword, your attacks will bring you to a somewhat immobile state for a moment while the attack is following through. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of expectation to cancel out of attacks in some way, like a dodge or a block, or if you just follow through with the swing and you're going to get hit if you get hit, sort of thing. I get the feeling of someone playing Dark Souls with the Great Sword, that you're going to, charge up, get one hit, maybe another hit, and then do a dodge roll. Because it's just such a slow and plodding sort of weapon. But the complete opposite of that, and they said that this is supposed to be polar ends of the spectrum, where the greatsword is big and strong and slows you all the way down. On the other end of the spectrum is the double daggers, which has 0 mobility limitation and restriction. It is a weapon you are meant to move and swing with, that you are supposed to be constantly mobile to make the most out of it. Now, I did see some amount of blocking with the greatsword, where the greatsword was being kind of held in this upward position, across the body blocking. And it looked like it was actually being used to fend off blows. So that's cool. I like block. I like having an active block for sure. It's good to have a block and a dodge for, depending on what you're trying to do, stay in the thick of things, you're going to want to block. Dual daggers, I don't know how much of a block it's going to have. I don't know what block does, if it fully negates damage or if it mitigates damage. And if it just mitigates damage, then the one with the greatsword blocking, okay, that's cool. You're probably going to do a decent amount of mitigation, not as much as using a shield. Dual daggers, you're probably going to take the edge off of a hit, but I think that's going to be more of a, keep moving sort of weapon. If you're skillful with it, even if you're using tab targeting, you're going to be able to circle around your opponent and kind of always stay towards their back while they're trying to focus on other targets. I don't know how much you're going to be able to spin around an individual enemy, because I would imagine they're just going to kind of pivot on a point because it's a 3D character in a 3D video game. But who knows? Maybe they'll have a turning radius and some limits, so you'll be able to kind of step around them and do that sort of thing. Could be that there's also some other abilities where you kind of give a partial distract that forces them to look in one direction, and then you can hit them from the other. It'll be nice to see all of that when it gets built in. And that's going to be, every weapon is going to be within that range. They didn't say how this was going to apply for ranged weapons, only melee weapons, but I'm going to take a bit of a guess that we're going to start seeing some of these things and how the ranged weapons work. For example, I would imagine a short bow is going to be on the higher level of mobility. A sling is going to be on the higher level of mobility. Throwing weapons are going to be on a higher level of mobility, not like big wind up and throw sort of things, but more like quick daggery sort of things. I don't know if you're able to see my various gestures on the camera. But that's the sort of thing that I think we're going to probably see on the faster, lighter side for people that want to stay mobile, versus on the other side, you're going to have like big ol' heavy honking crossbows that are going to do a whole lot of damage, but you're going to have to plant it in the ground and put your foot in that little thing, pull the damn crank back to get the next arrow in there. A long process to recharge. Spears. I would imagine spears could be done a lot of different ways. One-handed spear, two-handed spear, one-handed spear and a shield, one-handed spear and a different sort of weapon or tool in the offhand. A lot of different ways to do it. There are, in real world, a lot of different spear styles that exist. a lot of different designs for spears and how they're made. Some of them are, more what people think of, where it's a long pole with a little pokey thing on the end, versus I kind of think more along the lines of a pole arm, where it's got a big, sharp, bladed sort of thing, and a medium long stick, so you can get a little bit more oomph and leverage and stuff behind it, and control it a little bit better beside a shield. Kind of keep it tucked under like a lance almost. Um, I would imagine there's a certain somebody from the DOP crew that does heavy fighting and knows a little bit better about that sort of stuff. But um,
So, one thing that we should keep in mind is that we were looking at one. It was a demo of the basic weapon attacks.
mhm.
We did also get some active skills because we were looking at the weapon master, which is a fighter class. Um, so that hammer strike that we saw is probably a fighter active skill. The whirlwind that we saw is probably a fighter active skill. There were some people in the forums complaining that uh, hammer strike should not be something that you do with daggers, and also whirlwind should not be effective with daggers. But I'm pretty sure those are fighter active skills, and it doesn't matter what weapons you're using. Um, that makes me wonder about the block, though. So I'm not sure if the block, because I think you can block with the dagger. The dagger also had a blocking pose. I don't think we saw Steven use it against one of those rock monsters, which looked awesome, by the way. If you haven't seen the basic weapon attack combat demo, you should take a look, because just the mobs that were there were pretty cool. I haven't seen mobs quite like that in other games, and they looked awesome, very immersive. Um, but so I'm wondering if block is a fighter skill, and maybe rogue would not have block and would instead have dodge. Um, so I'm curious about that. It's the same for that rush. I think what we were looking at was the rush ability, um, which is I think a fighter active skill. I think we saw those three active skills. Some people were thinking that um, shouldn't be able to dodge, or they were bothered by how much dodge there was. But I think we were seeing some active skills for the fighter specifically. And they mentioned us seeing some abilities from the assassin earlier, but I'm not exactly sure which video that was. So I need to go back and take a look at that. But
There's the one we saw in the last one. He called the weapon master class. I wonder if the stuff in the assassin kit they're talking about is that trailer from way back when.
oh, the
Probably.
Predator.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, that seems too far away. But yeah, I really enjoyed what I saw. It's not too fast. I think I said in our setup that there were people in the forums who were saying that really BDO has the best action combat of any MMORPG, and I consider BDO really a hack and slash, and that combat's too fast for MMORPG. Um, but I've found the speed that I saw in uh, the demo to be quite nice. This same person was, of course, saying, "Well, if you like tab target, then you should go play Pantheon." Um, and that's way too slow for me. So just my comfort level for action combat is Neverwinter Online. Um, I was pretty happy with that, and where a lot of younger people are saying that action combat is the future of MMORPGs, that's kind of my limit. I want it to be, if it's as fast as Neverwinter Online, I'm cool with that. If it's as fast as BDO or Diablo or something like that, I think that's just way too fast for an RPG. Doesn't really give you time to strategize with your group mates. Doesn't lend a lot of time for role playing. People usually just want to hack and slash and move on to the next combat and
Yeah.
hack and slash.
That
But
was
yeah,
In the A1, that's what it felt like, is if you successfully got through everything in your hotbar in the right order, the person in front of you died. And so that kind of sucks. It just means, okay, have all your stuff charged and throw all of your alpha strike damage and stuns and everything at the person. And if they don't go down, get the hell out of there because they're about to do the same thing to you. Or try to finish them off with whatever is recharged real fast. It didn't feel very tactical. It felt very face roll.
Yeah.
And if you knew how to roll your face across the keys just right, you would kill the other person every time.
So one of the things that I really loved about the demo was how we're going to be able to customize the damage text. We can do it by color. We can do it by size. We can do it by types of effects.
The icons show up for what's doing the damage.
Yeah, and so that has me thinking that's a great way to synergize because I've been kind of wondering about how that's going to work. That's a great way to synergize with the other people in your group. I liked the kind of rudimentary idea of that in EQ2, although it was a little too clunky back then. But um, yeah, I would love to kind of color coordinate the damage. If I can do size and color of, so I can synergize with the rogue or synergize with the mage. Um, if the mage is doing some kind of snare, then maybe I, as a rogue, would want to also do a snare. Um, and that can be hitting your peripheral vision as the combat's going along. So I'm very interested to play around with that and see how customizing our damage text is going to help us synergize with their group mates during combat.
I had a couple other thoughts about the way that we kind of got to see the combat system there.
Mhm.
And I guess I got a little bit of feels of like DC Universe Online, the thought that the way the weapon system worked in that, weapons and their abilities were completely separate than your class abilities. So whatever you would do as your class type, whatever your mutant power type was basically the skills on your hotbar versus all the special attacks with your weapons were coming from some combination of, I don't know what it was on the gamepad, but left click, right click, and the four directions. Now they've said that for this, it's going to be the direction input plus attack plus, I guess it was maybe where you're at in the combo sequence for
I
what the
think so.
next attack is going to be.
Mhm.
So it could be the sort of thing where it's okay to just stand still and click and you'll do fine, or hold forward and click and you'll do fine. But more of the nuance of how the weapons is going to come out as you start to see, okay, so if I do forward and attack for the first one, it's a bit of a lunge that'll get me in range, but has a long reach to it. If I follow that up with the left and attack, it'll do a side swipe that kind of circles me around the target a little bit and then kind of sets me up for the neutral stance and attack, which is maybe like a ground slam or something. And so you start to figure out positionally and effect wise what the different combos you want to start to specify and focus are and where you're going to want to use them. Like you learned that back and attack on the third attack on maybe it's like a pole arm or something, always does this clearing spin around to get things off of you. So it could be that you go in, you do a forward attack for a lunge, you do a forward attack for, a swing, and then you do a back attack to knock everyone off of you real quick as a way to kind of move in, do a little damage, make a little room, maybe catch a heal, and continue doing that. DCOO combat was, I wouldn't say it was super fast paced. You could get rocked if you weren't paying attention to what you were doing, but there was a lot of anticipates and stuff, so you'd know where and when you kind of need to dodge to get out of the way of stuff. Um, and I think that was, part of what made it work. That even though it was a tab targeting system, the action part of the combat still felt good, and it still felt fun and interesting to use your weapon as one part of your character's expression that's completely different than the powers they're using. There was also an alternate advancement sort of thing where the more you used a weapon and leveled up into it, the more you got like passive attribute bonuses. And I liked it. Honestly, there was a lot of things that DCO did so damn right, and I think it gets less praise than it should for the sorts of things that it achieved. But I'm looking forward to that sort of thing. I'm looking forward to seeing direction plus place in the combo sequence gives you different combinations, different sort of things. Maybe if you do an attack right after a block, you can do a different sort of attack potentially. It could be that there are like very specific set combos, like step left attack, step right attack, step left attack is a very special sort of combo that you wouldn't normally get under other circumstances where you end on the step left attack. There's a lot they can do with the system as they've presented it. So I could probably keep on ranting about this, but I know it's not going to fit in one little video.
I also do want to see what the weapon skills tree is going to do. We didn't get to see that in alpha. I mean, we saw the weapon skills tree, but there was nothing in it. So I'm curious to see how that's going to factor in. Um, so one of the other complaints, I think I mentioned this during our setup, was I love the decals on the ground when the greatsword would clunk on the ground and leave these little cleaves in the ridges in the ground. I want to say I actually want to see more of that. So somebody was complaining and saying that you would not want to dull your great sword like that, although it's a magical world. So I think if your great sword is magically sharp, you never have to worry about it going dull. But I actually want to see more of that, and I would love to see an emote where I could have the great sword behind me, just dragging along in the ground and leaving those um, cuts in the ground, and then do a hammer strike like forward thing. And even if it's not a combat move, I would just pay for that as an emote of me running along and dragging my sword along the ground and leaving some kind of effect. And I think that would be awesome for emotes. Could we go through and just have combat practice emotes that maybe they don't do anything, maybe they don't cause any damage, but we can just do cool things with our different weapons, um, kind of like those Asian Tai Chi type stuff. I
Oh,
would love
going
to.
through a kata or something. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So I would love to see more of that. Somebody else, so some people were complaining about the yellow streaks that come when you're wielding the great sword and it's too flashy. Um, Someone was saying with the daggers that the daggers should not have any streaks and you should not be slashing with daggers. What you do with daggers is you thrust. So we should only have thrust moves with the daggers. And I'm thinking, okay, but that, like, how many animations is that going to be? I mean, even if slashing isn't realistic, I think it's going to be more fun to have some slashing just so that everything that you're doing with the daggers is not thrusting. But, one of my favorite games, my favorite single player MMORPG is KOA Reckoning. And my favorite thing to do in that is play Rogue and slash people's throats, jump on their back, and then slice. I'm a pacifist, so I usually try to avoid combat. But in KLA Reckoning, I loved jumping on people's backs, doing a stealth kill, slitting their throats, and watching the blood fly. Or on some of the mobs, you would just run it all, slice them all the way down the center. Um, so slicing can feel very good if it's done well. I think We should have more actions than just thrusting with daggers in an RPG.
Yeah, I agree.
So, you know, just because we're not fanboys, can I also just mention that this was a combat update? And how long have we been doing combat now? When was APOC out?
Yeah,
I just
APOC
don't
was
think
too fast.
but APOC was weapon oriented versus
I'm just
class
saying,
oriented.
we're still in these, like, we're testing things out. It's been 4 years. The only thing that makes me less sort of like, why are we still this behind on combat, is they're showing us all the other stuff. So they're clearly doing other things too.
Yeah. Yeah,
If,
yeah,
if
yeah.
we didn't see everything else, like if we didn't get the character creator and we didn't see the weather system, and we've been waiting and like, oh, here's combat again, it would be a bigger issue.
But we saw different combat, so I would be upset if what they showed us was a cleric or tank. Or what was the other? We had cleric, tank, and what?
Wizard or mage.
And mage, yeah. So I would be upset if we were seeing the same skills that we saw in Alpha 1. I'm glad that we're seeing different class skills, different active skills. Um, and it's just a little bit at a time, and that's okay. And I think we'll be seeing more. I think the idea is that we'll be seeing more combat once we get
So,
closer to Alpha 2, and we're not close to Alpha 2. So I think we're still at least a good 6 months away from Alpha 2. So
so
I don't
I,
mind seeing a little bit.
I want to add another thought just to combat. Not necessarily again because I care too much, but because we're talking about crafting in the chat, and that this idea that as you improve as a crafter, you should have less random, right? So combat too. I actually kind of think you apply that there as well, right? So you have I'm sure a hit statistic, like how much of your attempts actually hits, or how much, what is your damage based off that as you improve as a character, those things should also naturally improve. Now obviously you would be up against somebody else's deflection or their defense, but I would also
So
add that to combat too.
that would be the case that we should expect for tab target, but not for action, because action's going to be more based on player skill than character. And even that's one of the things that Jeffrey has mentioned, that there is going to be RNG always in combat in Ashes of Creation, but the way to mitigate that is with action combat. So the more action combat stuff you use, the less RNG you get when you're facing against opponents. And that's fine. So yes, I think it is an RPG, so we should expect RNG, and we should expect tab target, and we should expect to be able to build up our character skills to compensate for people who don't have, awesome player Twitch skills. My rogue should be able to dodge better than me as an average player with my player skills. My ranger should be able to hit better than my average player accuracy skills. That's the whole point of having an RPG, is to be able to create these characters who are legendary at their abilities.
At least heroic.
Yeah, we're trying to stay away from the hero word, right? Do we all have to be a hero? I don't know. Okay.
Oh no, you don't have to be a hero. Just have heroic levels of.
That's right.
I mean, you are returning through this big portal that you're somehow special, returning to your lost planet that you now get to destroy, because that's the nature of
we're building
sentient
it up.
beings with consciousness.
We're building it up.
Somehow my cousins don't have branchlers, and I'm offended. I'm a pirate. What's wrong with those other elves?
The other thing that I thought with regards to combat and PvP, one of the questions was about foliage, I think, and being able to kind of dial back.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And the idea was can a PvP player dial things back to make it easier to see, less laggy? And the answer was no, that the intention is, that's part of the world. You'll hide in bushes, maybe. But I'm just thinking about, okay, if that's the case and you're not going to have sliders for less detail, how many people are going to have to buy a new computer Or is
okay.
UE5 also advanced in a performance standpoint?
UE5 is gonna perform well if you've got the basic hardware, but this machine of mine with a processor 9 years old and a graphics cards, a 970 from a while back, it ain't running the game. I tell you that much.
The game isn't
So
launching for another 3 years anyway, so you'll have a new computer by then.
yeah, Alpha 2 is Unreal 5 though, so I'll need it to participate in that.
That's at least a year away. Come on. No,
No,
I'm kidding.
no, I would imagine they're going to try to get it in this year before whatever like 1 to 3 week break in the winter that developers like to have.
And there's
But
no way they're getting it in this year, I don't think.
we'll
It's
see.
probably February and at the earliest, but
Said the
yeah,
coming
it's
months when
July.
he was talking about
No, that's
updates and stuff to A2, but
that we're going to be seeing things, but that's 6 months of seeing bits. It's not even close to like when they started showing preview for Alpha 1. That was 6 months out, and I
I
think this stuff isn't even
And
that.
I agree with Diggs here on one and two main reasons. Well, one main reason, one secondary, smaller reason. The biggest reason I don't think we see it this year is that they have said Alpha 2 will contain the basic, the crafting, harvesting, that whole sort of testing phase, not just the really simple stuff that we saw. And we've seen absolutely nothing related to any of that. And that's such a huge undertaking. Now, it could be like they did with the character creator that next month they come out and, hey, look, here's our crafting. I don't, I guess that could happen. I don't see that happening. The other thing too, is just now that Steven mentioned the map is going to be somehow drastically different too. I don't know. I just wonder how much that plays into this as well.
I don't know how much drastically different is, or if there's just
I mean,
changes.
it sounded significant, right?
Yeah, and I mean, we should be seeing those articles on the nodes. Those should come out before we get to Alpha 2. We should be seeing more articles on crafting. We should be seeing articles at the very least, even if not videos. We need to see the other races. I was asking about a comparison for the races we've seen. So in game, we should see a comparison of the uh, Dunir, the Pyre, um, Kalar. We need to see, and yeah, at least those three. Renkai, no, Vec. We should see those four in game. Um, so there's plenty to show. Then we're gonna have to see the. I would be expecting to see a demo for each of the 8 archetypes. And so, what are they going to do? We've got 6 months. We're 6 months out, and we've got 8 classes to see. Maybe they aren't going to show cleric, mage, and tank since we've seen those already.
The
But
other thing I'm gonna say though, and I guess the one pushback I'm gonna give before I kind of switch things up, if you guys are all right, is that I don't think the game design and character design and a lot of that team was impacted during the Unreal 4 to 5 switchover. So I don't know that they necessarily had a break in the action of what they were doing. As a result, they could be a lot further ahead than they're actually showing us, but not telling us because they want to maybe put some final touches on some things, or maybe they don't quite have the dedicated test space they want to show off ready just yet. And
I
it's
think
not,
they're
a feature out or two from that.
yeah, I think they're fairly far along. I'm not necessarily worried about them being behind or not doing stuff. What I'm saying is that they're going to be showing us stuff before Alpha 2 comes up as the preview to let us know that Alpha 2 is coming up. Hey, Alpha 2 is around the corner. Here's what we've got. And we got way more than 6 months worth of content for that, I think. But we'll see.
One other combat related thing that I forgot to mention earlier, I don't know how much they're going to do this, but I kind of have this interesting thought about just how much they're going to emphasize weapon swapping. Can you even change what weapons you're armed with in the middle of combat? And if so, is it the sort of thing that you're even expected to do, that you're supposed to go in with a certain type of armament and then maybe switch over at a different point for whatever sort of thing? Um
Yeah,
I go ahead.
I was looking for that in the video, and it seemed like he always switched weapons outside of combat. I did not see him switch weapons during combat. So my guess at the moment is that we're expected to do that slightly out of combat, not directly in the middle. Um, but that being said, also we can get if you had more to say about that, we can jump back to it. But that reminded me that when I was looking at the combat with those rock monsters, well, God mode doesn't really let us know completely what the expectation is, but it seemed like we were aggroing several monsters, almost like we're expected to be able to solo
No, I
several.
this is
Um,
again a lack of balancing, that I think he's a level 1 fighting level 30 creatures, and they're just attracted to him because of aggro.
or yeah, or um, or it could be that that's because the base they're balancing for 8-person group, so maybe we're gonna be doing more groups than aggroing solo stuff. Pulling might be a little bit more difficult if we're expected to do an 8-person group, but it's hard to tell again because he was in God mode. So
Yeah.
um,
That's
who knows
that's
what
the
the expectation is?
I would say that's the part in particular where I would emphasize the this is just a demo part,
Yeah,
where this was just to show off the attacks and what they look like and get
yeah,
feedback on them. So it's
yeah.
not to get balancing. We don't know the numbers intentionally.
Well,
Um, you know,
we know that the balance is for an 8-person group, but I don't know what that looks like for sure on the mob level. It just kind of made me think of that when he kept pulling 3 or 4 rocks at a time. It sounds like when you move through those areas, you're going to be pulling groups of stuff, maybe not
maybe.
just one at a time. So we'll see.
Or it could just be that his character level was low relative to their level, and it was just pulling a lot of them.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying. We can't really say
yeah,
because we don't know what the
I agree.
actual numbers were.
I agree.
Just a
Yep,
demo.
yep.
Just a demo. All right. So I mean, there's some Q&A stuff. Was there anything else in those that you guys wanted to talk about in particular?
Nope. I can go wherever you want to go.
Okie dokie. Well, I think, yeah, we will just kind of maybe look at the Q&A real fast. Naval mechanics and wind and sailing. Yep, there will be wind. There will be regular and predictable winds, apparently, for your trade routes and stuff. Um, some good stuff. They talk about it a little bit more. I think that's something that we're going to learn a lot more when they're really ready to show, like, the big boats demo. So, right now they've got buoyancy, they've got some of the mechanics, they've got some of the idea of how it's all going to work,
Yeah, when they show us
and
that in January.
or whenever. Um, Asking about gear customization. Um, that was where I got the thing that they're talking about with the dye channels that you put on your character's paper doll, so that way you're modifying the stuff that you're wearing to look a certain way, but that it's not per piece, it's per your whole character and their sort of profile. So whatever you're equipping is going to match their sort of signature colors of the time.
I loved that. What did you think?
I mean, that's how it should
Uh,
be.
I
Yeah,
like it.
Can you imagine a world where you have Hogwarts and you have Mount Doom and then you have people running around with 500 different colors?
yeah.
Oh, you mean a standard warlock armor with giant overcompensating shoulder pads from WoW? Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I
I
mean,
don't
That'd
care
you
be
about
know,
the
funny.
size of the shoulder pads,
and
but
it's
just the
I should
colors, and I'm
clarify.
glad it's limited.
I should clarify. I don't necessarily care about the number of colors. Like if it's planned and it looks good, great. It looks good. But like how many players will be color coordinated enough to
Exactly.
make something look good?
Exactly. Yeah, I was overjoyed to hear Steven mention that. So he wants to avoid the rainbow colors. I'm all for that.
I mean, why do you even need colors? All the edgelords are just going to wear black and red.
Ha 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 ha. Or red and black.
Or red and black, yep. So the next one was asking about freeholds. Most players want a freehold where they'd be symbols of prestige. It's basically, hey, if you want to pony up the materials to get a freehold, and I guess the mayor approves, then you can get a freehold, but it can get knocked over. It's got the trade-off. So if you're doing it for some economic purpose, or you're just doing it to role play or whatever, know what you're getting into.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Don't get raided.
Nope, we're having fun time in the chat.
So
since we have an oracle in there right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to pin him down.
Yeah.
So when are you going to join us on stream? That's what I want to know.
Wait, I also had something from the beginning, because you mentioned race. You mentioned this is what the freehold designs. You mentioned influences, race and biome and season. I'm also thinking about religion, social organization. Maybe we can have those have influences as well. Especially religion could be fascinating. What could you do to highlight your religion on your freehold? So now we're talking about gods in the chat, so that had me thinking about religion.
So, will there be flooding caused by heavy rain, snow melt, or storms, rivers, rough waters, ocean? Haven't done work in those, but I've talked about flooding.
Yeah, so this was my
events.
question. So let me point this out really quickly. I put this in chat. I thought this was freaking hilarious because I was at work when you were sitting there, Diggs. Oh, they answered your question. It's like, son of a bitch. I would have asked a better question. Because it was our one of our last shows, we kind of talked a little bit about how you only get one question for each stream. So you effectively get just 12 questions a year that most of the time, 95% of the time, they're not going to get answered. So we talked about that for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the very next dev stream, my question got answered. I would have asked a better question. I would have asked a lore question, although it probably then wouldn't have gotten answered. But what I asked, was, in regards to the weather, because I thought this was the weather looks cool, but my biggest concern about the weather is if it's constantly the same. If you have seasons that are always the same and you have storms that are always the same, eventually it's like music in an MMORPG. You kind of just tune it out of your mind. Unless you have a specific reason, like, okay, it's the winter, this place is frozen over, now I can go to a new dungeon. Otherwise, it just sort of disappears. So if you can add variability, things like droughts, things like floods. They talked about that the low points in the roads collect the water. So, can you conceivably add more rain? And it looked like Stephen was doing that during the weather demo, to just give storms that track and grow and shrink and affect naval combat and stuff. The answer he gave me honestly was a little bit disappointing. Because they were sort of, I think they talked about deserts. It's like, okay, well, that's already dry. And then he mentioned, they talked about maybe there's a place in the spring that it floods over and you can't access it anymore. But that's kind of what I was just like talking about. If it's something that's completely static and it's basically just a time gated dungeon, that also just, okay, that's not super interesting to me. So, anyways.
Well, a curious thing about that would be to think about how different buildings that are built might affect climate or weather. Because that affects what mobs are in the area and all that stuff. So it could be curious to have that also help change specifically what happens. And it would kind of be fairly random, or it would feel random to us. So it'll be curious to see if they're able to pull that off. Because I'm even thinking, not only different buildings, but different races. And in my head, I'm thinking, how would the different races, try to deal with weather, or, So
Oh,
they could do something like that.
one last thought I had on the foliage one. I forgot to say while you're talking about it. Um, I would imagine what's going to happen is they're going to make a sort of lowest quality blocker that'll look kind of crappy and like just looks like grass print or something. And if you turn your foliage all the way down, you still don't have any visibility advantage. You've just turned the quality of what needs to render down to its lowest and chunkiest sort of state. And then, it's like you drop the LOD to the lowest and then put a higher LOD like grass texture over it to make it look pretty. But it's if you're in a grassy sort of dense area, and you're trying to use that for cover, um, it's nice to be able to actually know that people won't be able to see you past it, especially if you're playing a shorter race, which I think is one of the appeals of playing a shorter race. The thing that it makes me wonder about, though, will it actually occlude line of sight? Will it actually block you from being able to target and locate people? Because otherwise, it's still just cosmetic and it might be blocking your camera from a certain angle. But if you've got your angle pulled all the way back, like Steven likes to do, the foliage really isn't going to matter very much at all. So, it's the sort of thing where when you think about it from that you can pull the camera all the way back, not really being able to see what it's blocking probably doesn't matter as much. And to that extent, it's not that I'm saying it should just be able to be turned off as a result, but I don't think your line of sight gets cut off based on how far you've got your camera back, but something is blocking your ability to see. I'm pretty sure if it's your character here and there's a wall and then another character is here, you can still pitch the camera up and see the character on the other side. If that's not the case, that's, I think, new, because I'm pretty sure you could kind of use the camera to see what was going on in different places.
If you want to stealth, be a rogue.
Yeah, so
We're almost out of time. I want to real quickly. I have actually a really good example of the weather part. So today, Final Fantasy 14, fishing, kind of every 5 levels, you have to do a class quest. You don't have to advance, but you get things out of it. So, but one of them, the last one I did was catching 5 fish at a certain area. They only came out when it was raining, which sounds kind of cool, but because
hassle.
it's a static thing, because it's like, now one thing that's neat about it, they have like a weather person that you can go talk, like they'll show you, okay, in this zone it's cloudy and in a few hours it's going to be raining, which is kind of neat. But I was sitting there just waiting. I knew it was going to rain because the weather person told me it was going to rain. So I was just sitting there waiting, and another character just popped up, sat there next to me. It's like, "What's up?" Like, "Yeah, not much. What are you doing? Waiting on the rain?" "Yep." It's like, "Yeah, me too." So there was like no excitement behind the weather because it's just so static. You're just, like you say, it's a chore. You have to just wait. So I would much rather have variability in things, to where, 2 weeks ago or the last winter was terrible. This one's a little bit better. You hope to plan for the next one because it could be bad, that sort of stuff.
But is it worse if you're going there and you're trying to wait and it's just never going to happen because it normally happens at this time, but uh, or it should normally happen, but lots of times it's random. There's no way for you to predict when it's coming. Isn't predictable better than non-predictable in that sense? I don't know.
Oh no,
Um,
I think the fact that they've added in this whole person that just statically tells you what the weather's going to change is neat. Now, could you turn that into a profession? Someone that actually learns to
I
read
was
the
going to say that.
signs,
Yeah,
like that would be fun. I think that would
yeah.
be a pretty neat thing to learn.
And I think especially what I'm looking forward to in Ashes of Creation is that because we know where a person's freehold is, um, we should be able to find that person at their weather associated freehold, or we know where their open world housing house is. We can go visit them. Um, when it's instanced apartments, who knows if they're going to be there or where they're going to be or whatever. But and can you get in there and all kinds of stuff. But I think that's going to be part of the beauty of having an open world. And hopefully, yeah, we do have people with professional knowledge who can help us with what's the latest mob in this area. I just came back from across the globe, and now they have, you know, uh, horses there instead of gazelles. I don't know. So
Well, all right, everyone. I think we are actually a little bit past our normal time. So thank you all for coming out. And this has been fun. Good night of chat and conversation. And we will be back next week, right? Yeah, I don't think either any of us have anything specific going on. So um, we will be dragging a lore person in, whether or not he wants to join. And we'll have to figure that out. Because I have a lot of questions, and what was just typed in chat did not help. So anyway, everybody have a good week, and we will see you next Sunday.
See you later, everybody. Have a good week.